Welcome to Not Starving Artist, the podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Benson, money coach and equity actor. I am your financial cheerleader, here to help you build your financial confidence and have power over your money. The best part, no budgeting or bi-weekly paychecks required. I went from being a broke BFA grad having weekly panic attacks about money to a financially confident, wealth-building actor and business owner. Money gets to feel fun, simple, and sexy, and I am going to show you how. What I want to talk about now is I want to switch gears and talk about goal setting, and I want to talk about Starving Artist Club. So goal setting was something that we realized was a sticky point for you.
Yes.
And not like goal setting as in like career and who I want to work with and like what I want, but like financially deciding on a number that you were going to shoot for in your business, because all business owners have projected profits that they desire to hit. But right, like for creatives and freelancers and artists, we're like, no, we're just running a little business, but we're doing our art, right? So talk to me about when it came to goal setting, why you were avoiding goal setting, and then what we talked about, and like now setting goals, how is that feeling? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah. It was really funny because I think of myself as being a very goal-oriented person. Like I'm pretty driven, pretty ambitious. Like, I go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But there were all of these, like, I remember like having all of these conversations that I felt like I was unintentionally trying to like duck out of, where it was like, okay, but what are your like big goals? Like, how do you see yourself 10 years down the road?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't like,
I cease to exist.
I'm not there. Like, and so it was really funny to me that like who I am as a very like I love to make a list. I love to get stuff done. Like I love to have a big day, whatever. But here I was like, I don't know what I want to do with like, what do I want to do with my money long term? I don't know. And so like getting some clarity around that has been difficult. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because like, I'm always comfortable. Like I feel like I can manage a day. I feel like I can even manage a week. But like thinking 5 or 10 years down the road, that's always felt sticky to me. Mm-hmm. And part of that, if I'm being kind to myself, part of that is like, sure, I love surprises, and a lot of my life has been a very large surprise. And I've loved that, like that's one of the greatest joys of my life is that it's not turned out like I thought. And I love that.
Right.
But there's another very real part of me that just feels like I can't manage that. I'm not the kind of person who gets to plan 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. Mm-hmm. And that's been a difficult thing to confront because now I have 10, 20, 30 years down the road money. Mm-hmm. And it's like,
oh yeah, boy, you do.
Oh yeah. And it's like, well, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
And so like getting a little more comfortable, thinking about some of those larger goals has been like a really positive byproduct of our coaching. Because it's forced me to live in my actual reality, which is that I have 10, 20, 30 years down the road money. Mm-hmm. And I'm allowed to make plans with that.
Yeah. And the thing about goal setting too, and something that we talked about was one, the aversion to goal setting, which was, I don't want to be disappointed. So I'm just not going to set goals and be happily surprised, right? That running theme.
Right. Yeah.
And then number two, that you can set goals and vision 5, 10, 15 years in the future, knowing full well, that's probably not actually what it's going to look like, but not setting the goals in the first place, like gives you no GPS location to move towards, right? Totally. It doesn't give you anything to course correct. So when we talk about goals, and I want you to continue, but for those of you listening, right? When we talk about goals, it's just about setting them. It's not about like, and this is now how the 15 next years of your life have to look.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And I think that was kind of what I perceived, that it's like, well, if I set a goal, then I have to do it. It can't change. And again, it's like, why? What part of you believes that that's true? Like, that doesn't line up with your lived experience or with what you believe. So like, why are you being so rigid? So I think it's true. Like there's a lot of fear of disappointment there. And sometimes for me, definitely for me, sometimes it's couched in like this happy-go-lucky, like, no, I just want to be surprised. And it's like, no, you want control of the future and you can't have it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And like that's a powerful drive for me and something I've been unpacking a lot just in recent days. It's just like, why do I feel this need, this like drive to be in control when again, that does not line up with what I deeply value as a person and what I believe as a person. It's like, nope, that does not check out. And so the idea of making these like open-handed goals for the future, like that's been very powerful for me. And also, like, if I'm being honest, incredibly intimidating. Like when we set, you know, surprise, surprise, I had a $500,000 year. And then I was feeling really good. And we were in coaching and you were like, let's set a goal for next year because that's what business leaders do. When you own your own business, you make projections. And I was like, oh, interesting. Didn't know that. Cool. And so I was like feeling my oats and I was like, you know what? I'm going to set $1 million goal. And you were like, yes, $1 million goal. And then for like months afterwards, I was like, oh shit. Why did I set $1 million goal? That's insane. What if 500K was just a fluke? And like, we had this conversation the other day. We were talking about potentially hiring an assistant. And you said, I don't know any 500K business that doesn't have more than one person on staff. And my brain immediately, it went, yeah, but what if you're not a 500K business? What if you're actually like a 300K business that just happened to have a really good year? And I was like, whoa, okay, that's enough. That's enough out of you. But like, that is real for me. It's still real. And we've spent so much time in coaching going, okay, wait, how am I supposed to do this? Wait, I set this goal and like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I was looking at my numbers this week because I had a CFO party and I was like, okay, well, here's where I am. And here's where I was last year. And there's, it's different. But I was like, I had a good moment because I thought to myself, yeah, but like, that's one job. That's one job. Like, you don't have to freak out about it. And I think like what I've started doing in recent months or in recent weeks, really, because it's still a very present discussion for me, is like, okay, do you think that you can make this $1 million goal by hustling? Can you do it by hustle alone? And I've come to the conclusion that the answer to that is no, because I'm working pretty hard. And there are things in my life that I'm not going to be in the booth at 10 p.m. doing a few more voiceover auditions. That doesn't serve me. But what I can do is release some of that hustle, knowing that ease brings better performances, more creativity in the booth, more good opportunities coming my way. And like, my goal now is like, okay, I've got this big goal, this $1 million goal, but my sub goal under that, to accomplish that, the main one is like, how can you be a really good CEO? And I think a really good CEO makes room for their employees, makes space for them to do what they do best, and doesn't ride them all the time about how they need to be working harder. And setting those goals and then those sub goals has been incredibly, incredibly challenging, but really revelatory because it's forced me to confront some things about like, well, okay, you did 500K. What makes you think you can't do $1 million? What makes you think that? And why? And sit there with that for a little while.
And what I want everyone to hear right now is that setting the goal of $1 million isn't actually about hustling so hard and trying to figure out all the logistical ways to make $1 million this year. Setting that goal and saying out loud, I want that, what needs to happen to make that true, allowed all of this to come up of my schedule's not working for me. Hustle is not going to be the way to get there. What do my numbers actually need to look like? We also stress tested your money flow. We were like, if you bring in $1 million in 1 year, where does your money flow start to break down? Let's proactively create ways to prevent it from starting to like clunk and smoke, right? We're going to start crafting some strategy. So all of these things that have come up, the assistant conversation, right? All of this came up because you said, I want to make $1 million in 1 year,
Yeah.
where not setting that goal would just have you operating in the same exact way as you had before. Just being like, I'm going to try and have another fluke year. Who knows, right? Close our eyes. It wouldn't have even brought any of these thoughts up for you to then work with and take new action on.
Yeah, that's so true. And I mean, like making a really big, bold goal like that, like I mean, again, it all goes back to identity, right? It's been like, well, who am I? You know, my knee-jerk thought was, well, who am I to set that kind of goal? That's ridiculous. Like, I'm not the kind of person who makes $1 million in a year. And it's like, well, why not? Like we were talking last week, 2 weeks ago, about restructuring the narrative, you know, like thinking about how you tell the story of your success. And that's been challenging for me because I've realized that there are some things in that story that are still sticking points for me, where it's like, wait a minute. Why are you telling it that way? Is that really how it happened? Or could you see that maybe it happened another way? Like maybe if you change your story, you won't have such a hard time wrapping your head around this $1 million goal. And like that's been very powerful for me to think of because it's allowed me to reshape some of the ways that I think about my person and like how I've come to this point, how I've gotten to this point. Because the bottom line is I don't believe it's a fluke. I think I've done a great job managing my business. And I think I've been preparing for this level of success for a long time.
Yeah.
And to be able to own that, and not in like, it's not that I have to strut around like and become a different person, but it's like, oh, wait, I can see how my story led to here. And that means I can probably see how it'll lead to $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And restructuring that narrative and my narrative around goals in general, like that's been incredibly powerful.
Because one of the things we talked about was you were like, well, what if I don't hit it? And I'm like, yeah, well, what if you don't hit it? And you're like, well, that would feel really disappointing. I would feel really sad. I'm like, cool. That's just a feeling. Like what happens is we are so afraid of feeling those icky feelings because it's uncomfortable, right? And so the fear of those feelings is keeping you from taking action that's actually gonna grow you. So I remember saying like, if you're okay feeling the disappointment and the sadness, if you set this goal and don't hit it, like, are you okay if that means you're going to make more than if you didn't even set that goal in the first place?
Right.
My business coach says like, do you want to make money or do you want to be right? And I love that. It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really true. And like I've been noticing, and our coaching has been a huge part of this, that I do this thing in my life where it's like, I'm always making a backup plan, bless my heart. Like I'm always doing that. It's like, and I look at that and I go, oh, sister, like that's rough. You're trying to make a backup plan because you're afraid you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And I do that with everything. And I felt really challenged in the last year, like a challenge from on high, that's been like, you got to stop making these backup plans. Don't you want to live a life marked by trust? Or do you want to live a life marked by doubt? Or do you want to like trust radically and like live really boldly and have a big old sweet life? And it's like, yeah, that's what I want. And it's like, okay, you got to stop making backup plans. Just make plans. It's okay if they don't go your way, just make plans. Don't make backup plans for the secret plan you have in your head that you're really afraid is not going to come true. Like that's so much more complicated than it needs to be. It's like, just make the plan. Just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And that's a really deep, like, part of my ethos is like, I will not live my life in fear. I will not make plans in fear. I will not do that. It does not fit. I don't believe in it. It like when I'm making plans or backup plans out of fear, like that is really dissonant with who I want to be. And so the ability to do that with my money, like how I've started to learn to just make plans, not backup plans in case you get disappointed, in case things go poorly, in case, today is your last voiceover job ever. There's a common refrain among us creatives, right? It's like, well, this is the last time. This is my last contract. No one's ever going to hire me to do this again. Like we all have that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, you can backup plan for that, or you can just make your plans, be
Mm-hmm.
bold, live your life. If you fail, you fail, but
Right.
like at
And
least
have,
try.
yeah. And have the self-trust that like, I know I'm scrappy. I know that like
Yeah.
the scrappiness that we learned as starving artists will
Yeah.
kick in if worst case scenario happens. So you don't even need to
Absolutely.
think about it, right? Like it's there,
Totally. Yeah,
right?
that's so true. And like
Mhm.
that's another way that I've been reframing my story is I look back and like the number of businesses I have started, like the
Mhm.
number of hustles I have ginned up out of nothing. Like I started working when I was like 9. I had a pet
Mhm.
sitting business. And like then when I was 12, I put an ad in the classifieds because I was like, I want to work with horses, but I don't have any money. And like that's not something I can afford to pay for. So I put an ad in the classifieds and was like, I will trade work for horseback riding lessons. And that's what I did from the time I was 12
Mhm.
to 15. And it's like that kid, she knows how to scrap. And
Mhm.
that's who I am today. And so, yeah, it's like, you don't even have to think about that. You've been doing that since you were a baby. Like,
A
don't worry about
bebe.
it. A little baby.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to now shift to like some of the logistical things, right?
Mm,
Like we're taking care of the starving artist version of yourself, right? Having a lot of compassion for her. And then we're
mhm.
making plans. And so with these plans comes that like tangible logistical action of let's get evidence under our belt that like we know what we're doing and like we are building wealth and we are doing the damn thing with our money.
Yeah.
So two of the things that come to mind for me that we haven't talked about yet are retirement and taxes. So
Yes.
let's talk about taxes first, because retirement then plays into your CPA,
Mhm.
accounting, all of that. When you first started with me, you had a CPA, sweet
Yeah.
man, was not
Yes.
for you, right? In
No.
the long term. So let's talk about initially where you were with your taxes. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about what we did after.
Yeah. So I was in like just not a great place with my CPA. I mean, I had a
Mhm.
CPA again, like I don't fault him. He's great at what he does. But he's a pretty old school guy. And there
Mhm.
was a lot of like I just every time I spoke with him, I felt stupid
Mhm.
every time. And it like it just I never understood what was going on. He was handling a lot of things in my business. And when I would ask for an explanation, oftentimes like it was given in like kind of a half-assed way, or it wasn't given at all. It was just kind of like passed down, like, yeah, we got it. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of that. And so there were all of these parts of my business, like my payroll, all of my taxes, like everything was running and I didn't know how. But
Mhm.
it wasn't a happy automated thing. You know, like there are parts of your business that you automate and it's like, great, now this is on lock and I don't have to think about it. It was like, this stuff is happening and I'm not sure it's being done well. I'm not sure it's optimized like for tax savings or for, the things that I need my business to do now that the numbers are growing. Like it was just this big question mark in my
Mhm.
business. And it was really hard to untangle from because this CPA had been the one who set up my LLC, you know, put it into motion in terms of how it was running, how it was structured. And when he started it, it was in 2020 that I founded the LLC. Um, but it was just kind of a side thing until it wasn't. Until like until I decided that it was time for me to just be Fablehound and branch out on
Mhm.
my own. And then it was like all this stuff rushed to the forefront because there were all these things
Mhm.
about my business that had been set up that I didn't know. And that as I pushed on them, it became clear that those things were not likely to be explained to me in a way that I could understand.
Mhm.
So I felt stupid.
Yeah.
And
And I,
ultimately that I was just like, wait a minute. I don't think I am stupid. I think I need to make a change.
right. And a huge part of what we did at the very beginning of our coaching time together was working on that thought of, I'm not good with money. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you were making a lot of progress in other areas of your money. But then when it came to taxes, it like just kept poking you in the side of like, no, nope,
Yes.
that's not true. That's not true. And it wasn't your fault. And I want everyone to hear this. If you've got an old white dude CPA who normally just does like W-2 workers taxes, businesses, like,
Yeah.
and you are a business owner and you're a creative and they're not talking to you, like there's so many other options out there, which we'll discuss. But this guy, to no fault of his own, like doesn't understand businesses like yours,
Yeah.
doesn't speak to young women like they are actual human beings who have really brilliant minds and visions. Also, CPAs in general are only like trained to look at the here and now, to look retrospectively at what happened the past year. And they're not looking forward. They're not seeing that you are tripling your business within the year and you have that vision. They're not explaining things. So there's like, why would she want to know about taxes? Right? Like and he would like call you on the phone, right? Instead of emailing you. And you were like, that structure is just not for your girl.
There was no paper trail. And I was like, I can't just remember, like, and I would try to write stuff down, but he would rattle it off so fast. And boy, it was very, very challenging.
Yes.
And also, like, to your point, it was this relationship where every time I would come to him with my numbers, he was surprised by my growth. And I remember, I think I was setting up a retirement account.
This is, the solo 401k.
Yes. And like, I asked him about it because right before I set up my solo 401k, I was like, well, I'm going to talk to him about it, because this is a change in my taxes. And he said, he was like, no, he was like, I'd just wait. He was like, I'd say wait and see if this growth kind of continues, and then you can go from there. And that was the moment I was like, I have to get out of this. This is no longer serving me, because I was like, he does not have the same vision for my business and for my future that I do. Like, he was so surprised by my growth.
Yeah.
And like, I get it. I was also surprised, but I was like, oh, he's going to continue to be surprised. And that's something I'm trying to move past.
Because in one of our coaching sessions, you were like, okay, I want to invest. That was one of the other things. You were like, I have all this money. I'm going to spend it and enjoy it, but I want to invest it. So, and I'm maxing out my IRA. Like, what's the next step? So we talked about the different options as a business owner to open. And I was like, with your growth and what you're projecting, solo 401k is going to be a great option for you. But because of how your CPA was articulating things to you, we both were unclear on how he had set things up or what the numbers were. So I was like, take this information. We discussed it all out. I was like, take this information to him. Here's what I think. Ask him these questions. Ask him what he thinks, like structure wise, with him being all in the nitty gritty of your numbers. And when he came back with that, you were like, that doesn't track. That doesn't clock. And I also want everyone to hear that, like, Emily, you feeling like dumb and not understanding and whatever had nothing to do with you. It was like you were in a toxic relationship and you were like being gaslit to feel like, I don't know anything about taxes. And so we were like, get out of that relationship. Let's find you someone who makes you feel supported, understanding your numbers. So now talk about your now CPA, your accounting, all of your tax experience now, a year later.
My goodness. That has been one of the one of the biggest investments I've made in my business in the last year. And like monetarily, the biggest. And I was super nervous to make it, but I knew I needed to make a change from this CPA. And so I found out about this amazing team of bookkeepers, accountants, tax people called Your Tax Coach. And I think they're based out of Arizona. So like not an Arkansas thing. That's where I am. And I was like, okay, this is not somebody where I can walk down to their office, but I started looking into them, felt like it was a really good fit, knew that they were the kind of like aggressive, business friendly team that would work really well for me. And their whole mantra is kind of built around this idea of like stress-free taxes for the burned out business owner. And I was like, hi, yes, that's me. Like And it was like, I'm never going to learn the tax code because I don't want to, but I need somebody who can be aggressive and explain things to me in a way that I can understand, because I don't have a master's in taxation, which is what the woman who runs this business has. And I was like, okay, let me try this out. And so I went down the road. They do this amazing free consult where they're like, send us your tax returns for the last 3 years and we'll do an analysis of how much money we can save you. And the number was incredible. It was a huge number. And I was like, this has got to be a joke. Like, how could there be this much disparity between tax teams? But there can be, because that's the nature of how complicated our tax code is. And so it was a huge investment to work with these guys. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it because this is a place, it's a sticky point for me in my business. And it's something that I want to understand. But also by that point, I had come like, and I'm a girl who had done her own taxes, like complication be damned, like all the years that I was working as an actor, like, I was 1099 in it. I've never been like a standard W-2 girl. And so like, I've gone all the way around, I've done the rigmarole. And so I was like, okay, I have a basic understanding of this. And you know what? That's about all that I want. And I want to be able to outsource this in a way that does right by my business. I don't want it to be completely opaque and make me feel stupid, but I also don't want to become an expert on the tax code. And so I found these folks, they did this incredible analysis. And now I'm working with them on like a tax strategy basis. So I work with like, I have them on a retainer essentially, and they like handle my tax strategy. They also handle my bookkeeping. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, to say nothing of the fact that I'm going to get back. Like, I think they got me back about 70K from the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like, it's just been such a good investment. And it's been really important for me to see that bear out, because again, sometimes when I said I want to be wise and optimize all my finances, how that really translated was like, I'm going to do it all because I'm afraid to outsource because that costs money. And to outsource this huge area of stress, and like now to be working with a team who gives me monthly updates. They send me beautiful, assessments of my books. We're like, we're like doing everything right. Everything's clean. Everything's by the books. But every time I have a question, I can say confidently, never once in all of the questions that I've asked have they ever made me feel stupid. And they are excited for my growth and expecting me to grow more. And it has made a huge difference.
Yeah. And it's like nothing changed. You didn't really learn any more about the tax code. It was just hiring someone different who was in alignment with your desires and what you wanted and understood you, that completely shifted. And now you are tax confident.
Yes,
right. And so many people have so much stress about taxes. And it's like, right. Like, even if you're not hiring this huge team and, wherever you're at with like your income and your tax journey, having someone that is on your side, that again is like understands you. If you are a woman, having a woman account, like it's a huge difference, right?
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to like, we talked all the way through this when it was actually happening in real time. Like, I remember this powerful idea that you introduced in our coaching where it was like, you're the business owner. Who's sitting at your table in your conference room? Who's playing on your team? You get to choose. And when I really like pictured that imaginatively, I'm picturing my old CPA at this table. And I was like, this is just not a good fit. Like, I'm hearing how he talks to me. I'm, feeling the feelings that I feel when that happens. And wait a minute, I don't think this is the right fit for my team. And just that like super empowering idea of like you saying to me, Emily, it's your team. It's your table. Pick good people to staff your business. And like that, that's something that I've always believed about business. Like, nobody can be everything. Nobody can be great at every aspect of your life. Like, you've got to know how to staff. You've got to know how to staff your weaknesses. And it's like, for me, taxes are a real vulnerability. I think for a lot of small business owners, like for a lot of business owners, for everyone, like it's a real area of like potential fear and anxiety. And the decision to have that tax team sit at my table, like it has, I mean, I can't even tell you how much of a relief it's been. It's changed the way I run my business, and it's just been one of the greatest investments I've made.
Yeah. And that your taxes are never a surprise. Like I remember
Yeah.
with this old CPA, it was just kind of like, don't worry about it. We'll get to it. Right. And
Yeah.
you were trying to prepare, but you
Yeah.
weren't being given the tools to prepare well. And
No.
so when the tax time came and it was more of like a shock and like you were kind of bracing for what's the number going to be, that doesn't do well for your nervous system and money. But
Right.
now having someone who's like giving you the tools and the estimates and whatever, so that you can put aside the number and you're doing your estimated taxes and like
Yeah.
nothing is a surprise, how calming that can feel for your nervous system doing taxes, which again have like historically for almost all of us been like fucking taxes. What's going
Oh
on?
my gosh. Yeah. I mean, it just like the mental load that has been relieved by like dealing with taxes in a more sustainable way.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to be a surprise. And it's like anytime I have an anxious thought about it, I'm like, "Oh, I have a team for that." Like, and
Yep.
that, oh my goodness. It's just amazing.
Yeah. So back to retirement, because this is
Mm.
one of our recent conversations. So we opened this new retirement account for you. It's something called a solo 401k for those of you listening. And you maxed it out last year.
Yeah.
And this year we were talking about, you were like, I'm on track to max it out very soon.
Yeah.
So what do I do after that? How do I optimize my money and my investments after that? So talk about like our conversation around like the optimization, the investing, the retirement.
Yes. Yeah. So, I've had a lot of I've had a decent amount of frustration with my retirement accounts because I'm new to them and it's been a steep learning curve. And having maxed it out last year, I was like, well, I have to do something different. I must optimize. And like I had a lot of like anxious feelings around it because I felt like I wasn't optimizing. And then I brought this idea to Brooke. I was like, maybe I should just like hire someone. Maybe I should outsource this. I've had this great luck outsourcing my taxes. Like maybe I just outsource all of my retirement accounts. And Brooke, you were like, well, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Like why would you need to outsource this? And I was like, well, am I optimizing? Optimize. And it became this great conversation around like, well, what if like you just very gently asked me like, well, what if you just like max it out? Like, what if you're just cool with maxing it out and like you do it and then that's it. You just max it out for a few years and just let that be. And I was like, what? Because I was like, that doesn't seem very optimized. And then I was like, wait a minute. And I have this, like, this goes back to my, original intake form. It's like, I must be wise. I must optimize everything. And I've come to the conclusion that the best way for me to live my life is not necessarily the most optimized way. And a lot of times when I say optimized, maybe this isn't true for everyone, but it's true for me. Usually when I'm thinking about optimizing, it's probably coming from a place of fear and like wanting to control what's going on.
Yeah.
And it is so like, I love thinking about it. It's comical to me because it's like 5 years ago, I didn't even know what a solo 401k was. Like I have never, up to the last 5 years, like never did I ever even think about having a retirement account.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just like, well, it's going to be like beans and Vienna sausages. Like that's my retirement account. And it was like, that was as good as I could do at the time. And so it's so funny to me that now I'm like, no, I must optimize. I must hire a financial, an investor, an investment counselor, because I need to really be optimizing my 401k contributions because merely maxing it out is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why? Why can't that just be enough for now?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and when you asked me that, I was like, that is enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's all right.
Yeah. And this goes into being okay in a season of sustaining. So when I talk about like seasons of spending and saving and sustaining, yes, in our like day to day, month to month money flow, but then also in certain areas of our money. So I'm so glad that you said like the question I asked you, which was, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And we realized that the problem was actually just this, like, I need to be doing more and I'm feeling comfortable here. And so I have to go and push and push and push, finding the hustle where there was none, finding the struggle where there was none. And so that's not an energy that we want to get a financial planner or wealth manager in. At some point, we will find you a financial planner and a wealth manager. That's coming very soon. But allowing yourself to be in a season of sustaining with like, and you're not just maxing out a regular 401k, you're getting to contribute as the employee and the employer. So it's like, do you know the number of what you contributed last year to your solo 401k?
I think the limit is 66 grand.
Did you, and you hit the 66, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you invested $66,000 last year, right?
Like, that's not my only investment account.
Exactly. Right. So as we're talking about this, it's like, what if investing $66,000 every year? What if that's plenty? What if that's fine? Right. And so being in that sustaining period where you get to move into a season of like, I'm going to max that out. And then let me raise the question of, with all this extra money, now what do I want to do with it? Like, what else can I explore? It's interesting what comes up when you're not just focused on optimization, because it's what you should do with money, because it's what the gurus say. You should be, buying the car and expensing it and then going and getting the real estate property. And then you're paying off your mortgage, like all of that crazy stuff. It's like, what if we just vibe and like get some goats and like hang out, maybe take a trip to Cancun, all of things which you did. So like, right. It's being in that season of sustaining in different areas of your money and your wealth as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And like it's a powerful idea to have different seasons of money. Because for me, like, I think I had this idea of like, well, you should always be in a season of saving. Always. That's the only season. There's one, and it's saving. And that's not really like, even when which I love to do, even when I like look at the natural world and I think about the organic nature of the natural world and I think about the organic nature of my own life. And it's like, well, okay, Emily, look outside the window. Do you see seasons? Yes, I do. Look at your life. Do you see seasons? Yes, I do. Why would I expect money to be so drastically different from that? And it's like, okay, all right, I need to take a step back here and think about like, what season am I in right now? Am I living in summer and I'm panicking because it's not winter? Yeah, sometimes that's exactly what's happening. and like making peace with where you're at. And also like, it's been such a funny thing for me to come up against, like with the retirement savings, like to come up against that and be like, okay, I've maxed it all out. And, I've done my retirement investing. I've done some regular investing. I've done some riskier investing because that's something I'm interested in. And now I still have money. And it's like, oh my word, I'm going to have to spend it on my life. And it's like, sometimes that terrifies me. Right. And it's like, what do you think money is? Like it's to be enjoyed, not revered or worshipped. It's to be enjoyed. Like it's for your life. It's for your life in the future and it's for your life right now. So don't be afraid.
Right. And if you're investing over $66,000 every single year right now at your age, like you better get prepared to spend fuck tons of money in your retirement. Like just get prepared and start practicing that right now. Right. Like practicing enjoying your money is such a hard thing for artists specifically, right? To buy ourselves things that are not necessary or needed because we were told for so long, like you should just be grateful if you get anything. And like, you're going to be at the bare minimum. So like be fucking grateful. It could all go away at any turn. And also knowing that neural pathway has been carved in stone in our brains. Yes, we can carve new ones, but it's about having that compassion and that understanding of like, oh, okay, I recognize this feeling. I'm probably, this feeling is going to come up until I am 85 years old. And I'm just going to see her and I'm going to say, you were welded during a time when you had to hustle, but like we're in a different time now and we're going to move on. Like it's the quickness of moving through those new thoughts, rather than like staying stuck in them, instead of like, it's not a problem when the thought comes up. And that's something we've talked about too. Having that thought isn't the problem. It's how quickly you're moving through it or you're staying stuck there.
That's so true. Like, because, you know, and at points in our coaching, like it's been disappointing to me to watch those same old thoughts come up and those same kind of knee-jerk reactions come up, but it's been so good. Like you've been so encouraging about like, well, just clock it. Just clock it and you don't have to stay there. But it's like, let's be honest with each other. These are neural pathways that are well trodden and like they're gonna be there, you know. It's a well-established path. It's gonna be there. Doesn't mean you can't take a new path, or that you can't go halfway down that path and go, oh, hold on, turn around, I'm gonna go back to my new neural pathway that I carved a month ago or a year ago or whatever. But like, it's always, you know, those thoughts are gonna stay with me, and if they eventually go away, awesome. But if they don't, that's okay. It doesn't mean that I still can't choose new paths.
Okay, so the final couple of questions that I want to ask you, I want you to kind of sum up for me, like what has been your biggest aha, biggest transformation? Like if you had to give like one sentence or an energy, what would you say from coaching this past year?
I would say you get to be you and wealthy.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah, me too. Because again, like I thought when I came to you, it was like with this energy of like, this person is going to teach me how to be a finance person, how to be a person who's good with money. And it's like, that really,
which I did.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, naturally. But like you did that without, like you did it in a way that allowed me to still be me. And not only that allowed me, it wasn't like, okay, I guess you can still be who you are and I'm going to teach you all this stuff, even though you're kind of dumb about it. That was so not the energy. The energy was, well, how do you want this to work? Well, you're the one who made this money. So like, how do you want it to flow? What works for you? What are your values around this? What lights you up? What excites you? And that blew my mind, that I got to be who I was and manage my money like a total badass pro. I just didn't think those two things could coexist. Right. And you taught me that they can. And the evidence that that's true is all around me now.
I love that so much.
The proof's in the pudding, you know?
Yeah. So are there any wins or aha moments that we haven't touched on yet that you want to share?
I think that the celebration we had, it's kind of tagging off of something we've talked about already, but the celebration that we had around my first year of business was really important. And I remember feeling like that celebration was such a big thing, because I had been in business by myself for a year. And so I took an all-inclusive trip to Cancun. And I never in my life have done anything like that before. And it was so interesting because even in like, after I had booked it and I was like, you know, telling people I was going out of town, all of my language was like, this isn't the kind of thing I usually do, but I clocked that and we talked about it. And it became this great conversation about like, well, why? Why isn't that the kind of thing you usually do? And why do you need to qualify it that way? Why can't you just do it? Why are you embarrassed by your success? And why don't you do more of that? And like, it's just been so powerful to have someone on my team in my corner who like can come up behind me and whisper in my ear, like, you know, that thing, you can do that. Go ahead and do that thing. And you know what? Do more of that thing. Don't be embarrassed. Don't make a backup plan. Celebrate it. Do it. And like, pay attention to the facts and trust them. It's not a fluke, you know? And like that, I think going to Cancun and doing something that felt so big, and I did it by myself, like it was just this moment of like marking my trust in the thing that I had done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you did that for yourself. And I also remember a couple of interesting things coming up afterwards. One being like, I feel like I need to make the most out of this trip. And it was like, but what if
Yes.
you don't? Because you could do this every quarter if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And then coming back and being like, it was fun. Is that really something I want to do every quarter though? Like you were like, I mean, Cancun all inclusive was fine, but I'm not sure if that is part of what I want to make a lifestyle upgrade, which is then something we talked about. It's like, now that you're here, like, what are the
Yeah.
lifestyle upgrades you want to make? Is Cancun all inclusive one of those things? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
going
and
to shepherding camp? Maybe. Like
yeah.
stuff like that. Like you are exploring, then what does that look like as part of your celebrating?
Yeah. And that's another one. I'm glad you brought up lifestyle upgrades because that was another big one. Because when I first started making like a lot more money, I had people caution me about the fact that I was making a lot more money. Now, those people cautioned me not really knowing me, or not really knowing my internal landscape in the way that they would need to in order to make that kind of statement. But I took it on because I'm just an eager beaver, and I was like, yeah, that's probably really good to think about. Yeah, yeah. And lifestyle creep is something that we talk a lot about, like a lot of millennials, everyone's so worried about
Mm-hmm.
us experiencing lifestyle creep. Which when I look at that from like a neutral perspective, it makes me laugh because like lifestyle creep is just it's not something that has been a problem for me, and like when I brought that to you, I was like, oh, Brooke, lifestyle creep. You were like, screw lifestyle creep. What about lifestyle upgrades?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh shit. Like, because I hadn't thought about that. Now there are some like obvious ones, like, yeah, now I have a house and that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But like also that's pretty basic, honestly. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I've treated myself with a place that has a roof, it's like, wow, what a treat. Like I have a domicile, like that's not that crazy, though. I know for a lot of folks my age, like that is out of reach, and for
Mm-hmm.
me for so long it was. And so
Yeah.
like having a home feels like a real lifestyle upgrade. But like you challenged me to
Mm-hmm.
stop thinking in terms of like fearful, this fearful vibe of, oh no, my lifestyle is creeping, and to think instead, like, look at the facts, Emily. Like, you were making under 30K a year most years, and now you're making six figures. Don't you think your life should look a little different? And I was like,
Right.
oh yeah, that's true. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah. Because lifestyle creep is something that is like thrown at us of like, beware of making more money because of lifestyle creep. But what
Yeah.
lifestyle creep actually is just people who are making a lot of money living paycheck to paycheck. But that dynamic exists with people who aren't making a lot of money. So it's just like, yeah, we want to not be living paycheck to paycheck. Great. Valid. But
Right.
when you're making a lot of money and you're not living paycheck to paycheck and you're investing and you're saving and you're stacking your accounts and you also still have money left over, you need to go buy yourself some fun shit,
Yeah.
experience some fun, upgrade your lifestyle, right?
Right.
To,
Right.
and this is identity work, which is what we've been talking about too. The identity of I'm no longer a starving artist. So me not being a starving artist means I need to change my surroundings. I need to get my nervous system acclimated to spending more money, to bringing things into my life to make my thought work easier. Like you
Yeah.
can do tangible action to make that mindset stuff easier. So
Yeah.
what's some of the stuff that's been percolating for you or that you've implemented when it comes to lifestyle upgrades?
Yeah. I've loosened the reins a little bit on. It's been a lot of thought work. I've loosened the reins on how I force myself to think around each purchase. Because for a long time it was like, do you really need that?
Mm-hmm.
And and that is how I've continued to operate in a lot of ways. Do you really need that? And allowing myself to spend money the way that a person like me would spend money. That sounds funny, but like that's what it is. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm a shoot from the hip kind of girl. And so like the bus is a good example of that, because it's like, I didn't think very hard about it. I just did it. And it was a lot of money for me to just do with, but I had it. I had plenty. And like that bus has paid for itself several times over.
Right.
And so just like loosening, oh man, maybe a better way to say it is not loosening the reins, but just like allowing my full self to be present in how I spend money. And so, you know, like I have a lot of animals. Like
so
that's
many
one
animals.
of the things is like, you want another dog? Sister, get another dog. You want some ducks? Cool, get some ducks. You want to spend money in your yard? Great, do it. You want to look at properties where eventually you can have pigs and sheep and cows? Look. Because that's within your capability. It's reasonable. So it's okay to do that.
Yeah. I love that so much.
Yeah. And you know, like other like more concrete things, like I found this piece of art that I loved the other day. And like I have like, that's something I'm passionate about. Like I have some amazing pieces from my friends like throughout my home. And I found this piece that I really loved, and it was more than I'd ever spent on a piece of art. And I was really nervous about it. And I sat on it for like a couple of weeks. And then I booked some big job. And I still have to like breadcrumb myself sometimes, you know? So then I was able to be like, hey, you see how you booked that big job? Why don't you go ahead and get that piece of art you really want? And I was like, you know what? I will. So I'm going to do that. And so I did. It's hanging in my living room, and it brings me so much joy, you know? Or like I bought this necklace, this beautiful necklace, like as a big celebration of like my first year of business, my 500K year, like, and it was a lot more than I would normally, you know, go for on something like that. And I had to breadcrumb myself again. I was like, what if somebody really loved you and they wanted to give you a gift that they knew you would treasure forever? Would this be too much? And I thought to myself, well, no, that would just be a really amazing, generous gift. And so I thought, okay, then do it for yourself. So it's like, I still have to do a little bit of mental gymnastics to get to those lifestyle upgrades, but they're happening.
Yeah, it's so incredible. So incredible. So one of my last questions is, for anyone who's listening, who's thinking about joining one-on-one coaching, what would you tell them?
Do it. I would say absolutely do it. Like, and honestly, I think one-on-one coaching with you was one of the first, like, it was one of the first, like, purchases I made, like business purchases that I felt like this is a significant business purchase. And again, up to that point, I was very much in my like, what do you need to spend? And so even for my business, like I had bought my booth, my in-home booth. I had bought the equipment that was absolutely required for me to do my job. I had done, you know, I'd spent a little bit of money on marketing, not much at all. And that was it. Like I was only doing what was necessary, or what I perceived was necessary. What I didn't know was how necessary this kind of investment was. Yeah. And so it was a little bit of a leap of faith, because I had never done any kind of coaching like this. But I thought, I'm going to give it a try. And like, I felt nervous, but it has, I mean, all I have to do is look at my last year of, you know, a 500K year. Like my time with you and like the cost of one-on-one coaching has been so worthwhile. I mean, it has like paid for itself in spades over and over and over again, because it's changed the way I run my business. And not only that, it's brought me to a crazy number of personal breakthroughs that have affected my entire life. And that's made me a better business person, and also a better friend, a better daughter, a better, you know, aunt, a better whatever. Like it's really elevated me to a new level of awareness in my personhood. It is incredible. Like, I just didn't know. I don't think there's any way you can know how much money stuff touches until you get into a coaching program like yours. And it was like, when I started coaching with you, I thought maybe we were going to optimize. That was the goal that I had. Like, I just hope this relieves some of my anxiety. I hope that Brooke can help me like set up a better savings account. And now the whole way I do business has changed.
Yeah.
And the whole way I interact personally with my business, like the way that I, as Emily, function as a CEO, CFO, and the talent, all of that has changed and been revolutionized, by the time that we've spent together and the deep work we've done.
Yeah. And that's also a testament to how you showed up into the container as well. And the fact that you stay getting coached, right? You were like, I'm not just going to set up the flow and be done, because there is so much. Money is all thoughts, right? Because the actions that we take with our money are because of the thoughts we have about it. So how we run our business, how we use our money, how we save our money, it's all about how we think about money. And so you showing up like fully as you, bringing all the mess, the thoughts, everything into it so that we could work through, and like not being ashamed by that and whatever, like how quickly you've been able to transform, right? In just 1 year. It's a huge testament to what you brought to the container as well. So it's been such a joy working with you. Any other things you'd like to share?
Same. It's been a total joy. And I mean, I would encourage anybody who is thinking about jumping into a coaching container to go for it. Because I mean, I think you're right. I think I needed to meet you and work with you at this time in my business. And I really just feel so excited. Like I feel empowered to feel excited about my future because I'm starting on such a good foot. And I had a lot to unpack, and like I didn't even know how much I had to unpack, but all of those years of being a, badge wearing member of the Starving Artist Club, like there was a lot to work through, and it wasn't too late to work through it all. Even though I didn't start this business until I was in my early 30s, and I felt like, well, surely I've got it by now, and I didn't. And that wasn't ever something that you made me feel ashamed of or like I was behind. And I always have this feeling in my life that like I'm behind. I should be in a different place. And it has been such a life-giving and a healthy thing for me to work with someone who has never made me feel like that and who has empowered me to grow in so many ways in my life.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was fantastic. I feel like all of the people who are listening to this have just gotten such a treat by having you in their ears, hearing your journey. And like, it has been such an incredible journey. And also what you've created, like even before working together, that you set this up as an artist, right? Like creating this life for yourself as an artist. So thank you for sharing your time and your energy and your story with everyone.
Thanks.
See you next week on the podcast, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. Come join me on Instagram for more on how to build a simple, sexy relationship with your money. My Instagram handle is @NotStarvingArtists. And if you want to dive deeper with me, head to the show notes to learn more about one-on-one coaching. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend that you want to get rich with.